It's story time.
Hi, welcome to Storytime. I've got I don't know which camera's working. So I just wanted to come to you, as I do each week, and share a little, it's a story of my own becoming, my practice of living in the home that is my body. So this is probably not the easiest story to share, and yet the undercurrent of why it's not easy to share is not because of the vulnerability, but because of the risk of comparison. I don't want to share this story as a way of one-upping or even comparison that my story's not as hard as some other stories. That's not the point of storytelling, and that's not the point for our connection time. Story time is inherently about authentic connection in a safe space. And so I share this story with you, recognizing that for many of you, it might be pale in comparison. And yet others of you might not even recognize any hint of the lingering consequences of this story in my current life. So without any further apology or explanation, I want to take you back to my years in basically high school and college. I had been a dancer for as long as I felt I was me, really from my early adolescence, from my single-digit years and all the way through high school and then again into college. And as a result of that, I was active and I was engaged and I was really body aware. I could move and contort my body in all sorts of ways. But what I didn't have was a love for my body. Now, this has since changed, and yet I still struggle with it today. And that is self-esteem as it relates to body image. My particular body image challenge got to the point where I used the tool of exercise to overwork my body. It got to the point where I self-inflicted such deep damage to my joints and to my limbs that I got to the point where I could no longer move. Now, this was layered on to a secondary factor that I rationalized from a financial standpoint. See, I was earning my money as in high school and then through college so that I could pay for my undergraduate education. One of 7 children, the way that I was going to get through school was by paying for it and taking out loans. Now, I chose to attend a private institution, which meant that there was quite a hefty bill. So I worked a lot. I worked a lot wherever I could in order to save the money to pay for my tuition, room, and board. But one of the decisions that I made was to reduce my meal plan as small as the institution would allow me so that I could save a few $100s between what was essentially a commuter's plan. In other words, I had 10 meals for a week for the duration of my semester. But I lived and worked on campus, so I was eating all of my meals on campus. I didn't have a kitchen. I didn't have access. We were in the inner city of Milwaukee, so I didn't have access to a grocery store, and I certainly couldn't afford eating out at the local restaurants or even paying cash in our, at that time, the adjunct dining facilities, more like on-campus pubs. So that meant that I ate only 10 meals a day. And I would try to sustain my level of activity, which was often 2 workouts a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, of 90 minutes to 2 hours worth of cardiovascular and weight training exercise. Now, what I know now and what I see when I look at the images of my fitness level at that time in my life is not what I experienced at that time in my life. I was always competing with some sort of inner message that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't fit enough, I wasn't curvy enough, I wasn't strong enough. And I didn't even recognize then that those two goals were in competition. It's hard to be muscular and trim and supple and curvy, but I wanted it all. So I bicycled and I ran and I did aerobics classes and I did weight circuit training. I did all of the things that I had learned through my decades of training and conditioning as a dancer and as someone who was invested in wellness. But I wasn't yet fluent or listening to the language of my body's fatigue. I pushed more and more, in which case this was my own undoing. This was what I had to relearn, and fortunately, yoga provided me with that safe space. And in the years since then, I have committed myself not only to try and overcome this undertone, this undercurrent, this myth that shows up in my own psyche that tells me to push harder, to do more. But now that I'm on the other side of this youth, let's just say, I'm dealing more with the consequences of my body's aging than I ever even recognized was potentially possible. In other words, I'm experiencing regular and consistent ongoing pain. And even when I apply all that I know, which I know a lot about therapeutic readjustment and realignment, I'm still having to come to terms with the pain that lives in primarily my feet. So what is it that I want you to understand from this story is that it's not just how I impact my own beingness, but it's also how those myths have influenced the way in which I associate with others. And specifically, that became evident in raising my children. At first, I thought I'm raising my daughters, but it really was as important for me to shift that orientation, to shift that mindset with both my daughters and my son. And especially now in this age of much more gender fluidity, that breaking some of those gender boundaries has been a big part of my own healing in terms of my body image and self-esteem. So what do we know about these conditions, this societal understanding? Well, we have the term self-image, which is really the idea, the concept, or the mental image one has of themselves. Now, I was aware of this dissection, this separation and distinction, that when I look at the picture of who I was and remember what I felt, there is a disconnect between the image that I see now and the image that I saw then. There was a definite disconnect in the accuracy of truth and how I perceived my being. This then also related to my self-esteem. And this was, self-esteem is defined as that realistic respect for or favorable impression of oneself, self-respect. Now, on one hand, I have a great deal, and I've always had a great deal of self-respect when it comes to my service heart and my intellectual capability. But when it comes to my value as a human being, particularly as a feminine sexual being, that has always been deficient. Always, for as long as I can remember. And I feel like this is a result of this dichotomy between having to choose between being cute and being smart, between being strong and being sexy. And having to internalize that in the practice of living and being me, I didn't have someone to help guide me, to help sort out these conflicting myths. I tried. And there were those who had influence at different times in different seasons of my life, but overall, the undercurrent of that message was a body image that diminished the value of who I was in service and in intellect because I was never at ease in this body. Now, today as a yogi, I teach these concepts a little bit differently based on the principles of yoga, in the sense that our body is only one component of who we be in the world. Now, there are some yogis who say that the practice of yoga is to overcome the burden of our physical body. But I really aspire more to the idea of learning to listen to the language of the body. The body's language is movement, as the energy body's language is sound. Words, perhaps, yes. Moaning, groaning, sighing, all of these are ways in which energy moves through the vocal cords to communicate. And the energy, or the language of the mind stuff, the intellectual brain, the emotional heart, and the intuitive belly, is not just our thoughts, but also our feelings and our gut responses. Learning to listen to all three of these dimensions of my being has helped me to notice when there's a misalignment, when there's a false belief that is projecting itself into my decision making. In other words, I'm looking to find an alignment between my body, my breath, and my mind so that I can choose more wisely, not only what to do, but how to think and how to decide, how to cultivate clarity. So with that said, my journey's not done. The truth is, I still struggle with body image and its related esteem issues. Now, the good side of that is I no longer break myself by over pushing. Now it's a matter of learning to accept what is and who I am, even if it doesn't meet the standard that I've set for myself, I've inherited or assumed from society, and I am blessed because I am supported by a loving partner who affirms and encourages me to not only love my body, but to love the body that I have created, right? That through my practice of breathing, moving, and resting, not just as a yogi, but even as a dancer, even as a child, even before I put all these pieces and parts together, is that today I am a culmination of all the things that I have done, not done for the years before. And so we begin again this practice, as Stephen Cope calls it, of finding a calm, abiding space, a safe home, the channel of energy to express itself transparently and in alignment from my own best true self to the world in which I want to commune. I am already part of that oneness, yes, as are you. But knowing that on a cellular level, knowing that on an energetic level, is about rewiring some of the myths that made me believe that I was separate, that I was not enough, that I was unworthy of love and connection. Now, I'm wearing my Women's Circle t-shirt today because I'm embarking with a group, an intimate group of about 8 women to explore this journey of finding a calm, abiding space in this world, in our bodies, and in our circle, so that we can show up for authentic living, so that we can love ourselves as the precursor, perhaps, to loving each other. So this work, for me, it continues. But I have found that I can continue this work with more compassion and more perseverance when I do it in community, when I share and connect with others who, their story may be completely different, and yet we all have obstacles that have at some point challenged our self-image, our self-esteem, our body image, our worthiness. If you have a challenge with food, with over-exercising, with addictions, reach out for help. And if I can be a mediator to help find that help, then please reach out and I will be with you through the process of finding the help, the intervention, the support that you need. Be well. May you breathe deeply and move freely. May you labor lovingly and live vibrantly. May you be well. Namaste. I hope to see you next Tuesday. And if you happen to be one of the folks joining me for Circle, I'll see you soon. Bye for now.